Hi, I'm João Almeida, and you're watching The Cycling Dane.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another preview show here on the Cycling Dane channel. And we are, of course, looking at the 77th edition of La Vuelta a España, the third Grand Tour of the year and the biggest race in Spain. As always, I'm joined by Mr. Guru himself, Ewan Wilson. And Ewan, when I say Vuelta a España for you, what comes to mind?
Well, it's the sort of sloppy seconds of the Grand Tour world. It's the third Grand Tour of the year, the race for red, and it's usually the one we think about the least. Plenty of guys target the Tour de France, target the Giro-Italia, then we have the Vuelta. But often, even though it's maybe a bit of an afterthought, it can throw up some of the most exciting racing that we have in the calendar. It's unpredictable, it's hot, it's steep, and it's certainly unique. And this year we have a very open start list, so I think we could have another vintage Vuelta in 2022.
Right, great way to start the previous show. Vuelta a España, yeah, you saved that a bit at the end, but last year we saw, yes, again, Primoz Roglic winning for a third time in a row. There are question marks over the defending champion, but before we talk about all that, Ewan, what is the route for the riders in this year's La Vuelta a España?
Well, La Vuelta a España 2022 will begin not in Spain, but in Utrecht, up in the Netherlands. This is a Grand Départ that was supposed to be scheduled a number of years ago, but was delayed due to everyone's favorite virus, COVID-19. This will in fact mark the first time that the Vuelta will start in the Netherlands, as the race doesn't usually hop internationally, particularly for its big starts. But the race will kick off with a team time trial. This is actually the first time a team time trial will feature at a Grand Tour since 2019's Vuelta a España, given that they sort of wiped it out due to COVID team fragility and so forth. But in the Netherlands, they'll have a 23-kilometer long race against the clock around the city of Utrecht. Stage 2 will be a simple sprint stage from Den Bosch up to Utrecht, before Stage 3's pan-flat stage around Breda. It's as flat as they come, pancake, pannekuchen, whatever you want to call it. It's very fitting for the Netherlands before we fly over back to Spain for Stage 4, which will take the riders into the Basque country with a hilly finish to La Guardia. From here, we will dash around the wonderful city of Bilbao on Stage 5 before the Vuelta's first mountaintop finish at Pico Llano, which offers a 12-kilometer long ascent at 6.6% average. If one summit finish in the first week wasn't enough for you guys, well, after moving across the northern coast, we will have another at Colau Fancoaya in Asturias. To close off week 1, we have yet another hilltop finish at La Prerias Nava, which will be a typical Vuelta a España paint-by-numbers hilltop finish. Week 2 will be a crucial chapter in this Vuelta a España, opening with a time trial around the city of Alicante. English and tourists will know the city well, but for the riders, it'll be important as they dash around the city in a 31-kilometer long time trial, which could prove to be a major crossroads in the GC game. The day after, we go to a meat factory in Alejandro Valverde's home region of Murcia. The stage, however, is not that remarkable. I just wanted to mention the fact that we begin a stage at a ham factory. That just seems silly. Stage 12, on the other hand, will be even more eventful with a meaty mountaintop finish to the Peñas Blancas. This climb will be 20 kilometers at an average of 6% in gradient. And in typical Vuelta a España fashion, the climbing keeps on coming with Stage 14's mountain stage before rounding off week 2 with the infernal Sierra Nevada climb. This climb will take the riders up to 2,500 meters of altitude, but the actual difficulty of the climb will be amplified by 19 kilometers long ascent, and that's an average of 8% gradient. However, to be quite honest, it's very likely that the Vuelta will be decided by the end of week 2. Week 3 does give some chances for a GC reshuffle. However, it's not quite the earth-shattering seismic stages that we might see in other Grand Tours. We do, however, have a steep finish on Stage 17, a shallow summit finish on Stage 18, but Stage 20's bizarre-looking profile could make for some unpredictable racing, to say the least. I'll say that. After a hiatus of going back to Madrid, we return to the Spanish capital for a sprint stage on Stage 21 to round out the Vuelta a España on September the 11th, when our victor will be crowned in Madrid.
Yeah, with that, where better to go next than our favorites of this year's La Vuelta a España? And where best to start, he's already been mentioned. Primoz Roglic thought he was going to win the Tour de France this year for the first time. Jonas Vingegaard did so, but that aside, Ewan, we should still talk about him. He has had a bit of a bad July once again. Injuries plaguing him. He has been an uncertainty for this year's Vuelta a España, but Primoz Roglic, how do you think his chances are this year of doing a fourth Vuelta a España in a row?
Well, first we should address those question marks there about where he is in terms of injury. He pulled out the Tour de France. It's rumored, highly rumored, in fact, that he broke some vertebrae there. And he's been recovering ever since he went on a ride, I think, around Monaco about 2 weeks before the Vuelta a España started. And he's working with a close Slovenian doctor to help him recover in time for the Vuelta. Is it going to happen? We don't know. Let's just imagine that Roglič will be there. He is the king of the Vuelta in recent years. He has won 3 in a row. Last year, he was completely uncontested. It was the most emphatic Primoz Roglic victory I think we've ever seen at the Vuelta a España, leading effectively from start to finish. Yes, he gave his red jersey out on loan to off Christian Eiking and Ryan Tarame, but it just felt like there was nothing stopping him, even though he did come down in a crash on stage 10, let's remember. But this year's route as well, I mean, nothing seems to stop Roglic in the Vuelta a España route. He's got the team time trial to kick things off. His team, which is a Dutch team, was starting a stage in the Netherlands. They probably prepared for it. And looking at the start list, we have Rowan Dennis, Eduardo Affini. These guys are a good time trials. They're going to work well, and Roglic will probably gain time, if not go into the top 10 on the first day of racing in Utrecht. Following on from that, we have a number of summit finishes, these kickers to the end with the sort of 10%, the typical Vuelta a España finishes. Roglic does very well there. Also in the high mountains, Roglic does well. There's that 30-kilometer long time trial in Alicante. I don't see a reason why Roglic cannot win this race if he's in full shape. If he's not in full force, then yes, it probably is another question. But this is, if everything goes to plan, number 4 should be on.
Yeah, it definitely is a very strong team. And like you said, the engines, the turbo diesel engines with Dennis and Affini could be very interesting for the mountain train as well as that first stage. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Primoz. They'll be over the moon with their first ever Tour de France victory as the Jumbo Visma outfit. So we'll have to see if that takes fruition. But Ewan, moving on, one guy we have talked about already. He's only done one Grand Tour before in his career, but he's one of the hot favorites. We discussed it in depth. Remco Evenepoel to the Vuelta a España. Is he going to be the first Belgian rider to win here in La Vuelta since, fairly unknown rider called Freddie Martins? I'm kidding. He's very known. A demon on the bike. But Ewan, Freddie Martins, 1977, dominated the Vuelta a España. Do you think perhaps we could see Remco Evenepoel do something similar, or do you think it's a bridge too far for the young 22-year-old?
This is going to be fascinating to see what Remco does. I'm very, very intrigued with this story. We spoke about it in the other video, but in terms of looking and comparing between this Vuelta and the Giro he started. The Giro he started in 2021 was after a big injury hiatus, after what was a crazy accident at Lombardia in 2020. He didn't have any racing in his legs before that. He came into it in his first Grand Tour. There was an awful lot of pressure. It feels like there's less pressure on him now, and he actually has better form going into this race. He won the Classica San Sebastian in such dominant fashion. If Remco can translate all these one-week stage race performances, these one-day race performances into a Grand Tour setting, he is going to be very, very difficult to match. The only person I could see sort of riding with him maybe could be a Pogacar or a Vingegaard. Remco has this style, this courageous attacking spirit that not that many people here on this Vuelta a España start list have. Yes, maybe Roglic has it if he's there in full form, but Remco is just daring. He's different. And with a time trial as well on stage 10, he could go into red very early on and try to control this race from the front, attack as much as he can. But is that form of approaching a Grand Tour the best way possible? Can you attack every single mountain stage with 60 kilometers to go and solo out and win the race overall? That's another question. We've seen Pogacar try to do it, and I mean, he doesn't do it every day, but it's certainly successful when he does it. Looking deeper into the team, we have Fausto Masnada here, strong Italian climber, worked with him at the Giro last year, did his Divennes. Similarly, Ilan van Wilder as well, who has been plagued with so much bad luck this year, but he's a very, very strong young Belgian talent, and Louis Vervaeke, who moved over from Albus Phoenix to help this team in the mountains and mainly to protect Remco Evenepoel. Similarly, Julian Alaphilippe will be starting this one. He will be, I think, a really vital aspect of this team. Remco and Julian, they work very well together. There's no sort of power dynamic there. Just watch the Basque Country and so forth to get a glimpse of it. So if everything's harmonious in the team and Remco is as good as we're hoping, then he could certainly do well. He's super well-rounded, and on paper, he has what it takes to win a Grand Tour, but we haven't seen it proved yet. So there's not much point of comparison at this 3-week-long format.
Yeah, he's getting a bit old, and comparing him to Tadej Pogacar's age, that's a bit unkind. But yeah, well, with Quick Step, they're not renowned as Grand Tour team, and you touched on it there. Their team is completely different to a normal quick-step team that we're used to, and they have had not minor, but they've had really good success in terms of placing riders on the podium. Well, in the Giro d'Italia one time with Rigoberto Urán, and when they were called quick-step floors in 2018 with Enric Mas. But again, there it seemed like a bit more of solo efforts more than a team dynamic. I think the Urán one was a bit more of a team dynamic, but looking at the 2018 team, he was Enric Mas was sharing it with Elia Viviani. And as you said, this team, it's basically made for Remco and Julian Philippe. So do you think this is it? The stars are aligning for Quick-Step to finally take a Grand Tour?
Maybe. There are plenty of other people on the star list with a little bit more Grand Tour experience that could topple Remco. Maybe in the third week of racing, it will all get to him. But at the same time, there are plenty of profiles in this race that suit Remco Evenepoel down to a T. He's raced very well in Spain. Is it the heat? Is it just the roads? Whatever. He rides very well in Spain.
So anyway, going from one team that's not known at Grand Tour success in terms of the GC to another one that is Ineos Grenadiers, former winners of the La Vuelta a España, coming here with a former runner-up, Richard Carapaz, it looks like, who's going to be heading up this team, fresh off the Giro d'Italia almost, coming second there. And Ewan, it's a very interesting team.
We have many cards to play here. Currently on our provisional start list that we're working with about a week before the race, we have Richard Carapaz, Pavel Sivakov. We also have the brilliant young talent and Spanish national champion of Carlos Rodriguez. On top of that, Ethan Hayter's making his Grand Tour debut. That's so exciting for British fans as well. He's a super all-round and versatile rider, recently won the Tour of Poland. And on top of that, we also have Laurens de Plus, who's finally back to top shape, and I'm excited to see him race here. So this is an incredibly strong team. We will assume that Carapaz is the leader. Carapaz has come close to beating Roglic at the Vuelta a España. We know that from 2020, when he was close but no cigar, only a handful of seconds or so behind Primož. If he brings that here and doesn't play the Vuelta a España like the Giro, where he's just waiting around for the second place and waiting around, marking himself almost, he needs to be offensive. He needs to try to get the time as much as possible and get it as soon as. Carapaz is a super strong rider, really reliable in a Grand Tour. I definitely see him in the fight for a top 5. Dropping out of top 5 for Carapaz, I think, would be a major disappointment. Yes, he did that last year, the Vuelta, but it was a busy season with the Tour de France and the Olympics and the whole homecoming after the Olympics. This year, I think he's going to smooth the run into this race, and it looks like he has probably one of the strongest teams on paper with a number of big cards to play. What happens though after week 1 if Sivakov or Rodriguez is in a better position? Do they go for them or do they try to back Carapaz? It's a debate to be had. Ineos did it in the Tour de France with Geraint Thomas, where he became the sort of leader-elect as soon as the first week of racing was over. So maybe we'll have that here for Ineos Grenadiers, but in terms of these cards, Carapaz is certainly the most reliable and the most experienced in this kind of setting. So Ineos will definitely be key characters in this Vuelta a España.
Yeah, Ineos Grenadiers, definitely an exciting team. But you and Pavel Sivakov, you've spoken so highly of him. This could be, he's been top 10 in the Giro d'Italia before. This could be the Grand Tour that really he takes that next step if he's given the opportunity.
Sivakov is certainly an exciting rider, fresh from a Vuelta a Burgos victory with a couple of podiums and stages there. He is one of the most exciting talents to come out of France. But in terms of his Grand Tour pedigree, he's usually been working for other people. I would assume he's here to do the same thing. We saw at the Giro this year that he was a valuable asset to Carapaz in the final week of racing. I can only assume that he would be doing the same here.
Yeah, that would be very interesting, and would be a bit of a shame for the Russians just having lost him. But nevertheless,
would it be a shame for the Russians? They've got bigger fish to fry right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they don't care about Sivakov right now. But that aside, our final favorite to consider, the defending Giro d'Italia champion, somewhat surprising, somewhat not, but Bora Hansgrohe coming with, we presume, a Jai Hindley-led team, plenty of strong riders that we recognize from the Giro d'Italia. Also Sergio Higuita, who's going to be very interesting to see what he can do. But Ewan, Jai Hindley and Bora Hansgrohe, do you think this is perhaps one of the big favorites team this year in the Vuelta a España?
For sure. I think it is. Looking on paper, it's definitely one of the strongest. We have, plenty of cards here. We have Kelderman, Buchmann, Higuita, but Jai Hindley seems to be the main one. Disappointing Vuelta a Burgos, we must bear that in mind, but If everything falls into place, then this could certainly be good. We know he can ride a Grand Tour very strongly. He's probably okay with the heat, which of course Spain is hot. So I would say, is the strongest card to play here. Higuita is a super strong rider, but I don't think he's quite Grand Tour material in terms of sustaining an effort for 3 weeks. I think he's going to be a good stage wildcard and a good helper. Emu Buchmann, similarly, we saw the Giro that he and Kelderman were great teammates for Hindley. If Remco goes up the road, I think Bora and Ineos, the kind of teams that could chase him down and make him feel a little bit wobbled. If he tries these long range efforts, I'm not quite sure it's going to work because we have such strong teams here, and Hindley could benefit off of that, just like he did at the Giro, where he kept his powder dry in the first sort of week and a half, then struck in the final week. This year's Volta route doesn't quite work for that, but if he definitely attacks the second week with vigor, I think he could be in the driving seat to hold it all the way to Madrid.
So, Ewan, Alberto Contador, Marco Pantani, Miguel Indurain. Is Jai Hindley going to add himself to that list?
He would definitely seem like one of the sort of rogue picks on that list, but I think he could. Australia has been on a good run in the Grand Tours, so why not Hindley? I don't know whether, like, following the Giro, whether his training was a little bit not sort of wobbled a bit because he was doing interviews, doing a lot of like homecomings and all this kind of stuff that comes with being a Grand Tour, so maybe a surprise Grand Tour winner, a special Grand Tour winner, that maybe sort of these guys who serially win Grand Tours don't quite have. Maybe that messed with his training, but I'm expecting him to be there. He's a hard worker and he's a great Grand Tour rider. So Jai Hindley is certainly a pick for top 5, if not Kelderman.
Former top 5 finisher at the Vuelta as well. But yeah, moving on now to, we're not going to talk about Joao Almeida. We've done that in a video. Check that out up here. But yeah, moving to the outsiders, and where best to start then perhaps with a team that has 2 of the very recent runner-ups and the home team. Alejandro Valverde, leading Movistar with Enric Mas. And Ewan, do you think that it can be a success in the final Vuelta with Valverde?
Maybe. Question mark to be had. I think Valverde is definitely a very, very strong candidate for a podium here. He's similarly, like Carapaz, very reliable. He performs particularly well here in Spain. Even if his season hasn't been great to that point, he just bounces back in time for the Vuelta a España. It seems like his body is just used to firing on all 4 cylinders in the beginning of September. So I'm expecting Valverde to be a key character here. We also have Verona and Mas. Mas, consistent, not quite the most colorful rider in the Grand Tours, but he's also a good engine and a reliable one. There was some quite damning interviews done surrounding Enric Mas, where management said he doesn't quite have what it takes to be a Grand Tour leader and a winner, which I thought was a bit harsh, but maybe that has knocked his confidence and they're going to be going all out for Valverde here in the Vuelta a España. We passed through his home region of Murcia as well. He'll be motivated in what was probably going to be his last Vuelta a España. Punchy finishes, all this, all that. I mean, he's a safe bet, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add there to Movistar. We'll see what they can do.
The other problem I think with Movistar to be had is that they haven't been good all year. Like, they haven't really been spectacular as a team.
But they don't do that anymore. They don't like to do that anymore. Ever since they lost Nairo Quintana, Landa, they don't like that.
They don't like success. But they need something out of this Vuelta. They haven't won a stage here since Marc Soler won in 2020. So they need something out of this to salvage their season. They are currently hanging on by the skin of their teeth in the relegation battle. They better fight for this.
But moving on to another team with another rider, it's probably going to be his last, well, definitely be his last Vuelta a España. Vincenzo Nibali, a former champion of the race as well. He is coming with Miguel Angel Lopez, David de la Cruz as well, a former top 10 finisher. And Ewan, we haven't got the full list, obviously, but Astana could definitely be in the mix here for a top 10, top 5. Miguel Angel Lopez, we'll have to see how his extracurricular activities has harmed his training. But what do you think of Miguel Angel Lopez returning to the podium again at La Vuelta a España?
It's fascinating. Superman is back after his brief hiatus. You can read all about that if you want, but I think he's on good form. He looked good at Burgos. There's no reason to not think he's going to be here at the Vuelta a España, going for these mountain stages. He was good last year after a disappointing season. He's been up there in the past at the Vuelta. His body is probably used to fighting like this in September. Don't forget, at the Tour de France in 2020, when he won the stage they called La Loz, that was in typical Vuelta a España territory in terms of the calendar. So I'm going to say that Superman will definitely be there as a figure for the mountain stages, particularly the likes of Sierra Nevada, where it goes up to 2,000 meters plus altitude. Astana Kazakhstan had a surprisingly good Giro. They're probably going to be super motivated and quite more structured than they were at the Tour de France. I wouldn't be surprised if they do sneak into top 5, but do they have that flair, that edge to get the red jersey, to get that podium finish at the end? I'm not quite convinced. There are plenty of other candidates on this list, from Ineos, from Quickstep, from UAE, from Jumbo and Bora, who I think just a little bit stronger than maybe a Superman Lopez and the Astana collective.
Well, the next ones, I'm going to put them in the same category. Simon Yates, the last man to win before Primoz Roglic's reign at the Vuelta España, and also Bahrain victorious, with Jack Haig looking like he's going to be leading it, or is it going to be Gino Meda? And you and two English speakers. Jack Haig didn't get the honor of being the next Grand Tour winner from Australia, but out of these two, do you see them potentially being in the fight for top 5, top 3, top 10 even, or just out the picture? Simon Yates hasn't been great in terms of his top 10 Grand Tour form lately.
Jack Haig, definitely. I think Jack Haig, he's a rider who I think really enjoys the Grand Tour setting, performed very well last year, but he has just come back from a crash at the Tour de France. In terms of Gino Meda, I think mentally, I don't quite know if he's there for it. Bear in mind, he wasn't even convinced he wanted to continue with cycling as his career pathway not too long ago. Is he then going to motivate himself to win a Grand Tour and to fight every single day for it? I'm not convinced, but he's a lovely guy, and I'm hoping for all the best from Gino.
So anyway, Ewan, moving on to a classification that we don't give too much attention to normally, and that is the points classification at La Vuelta España. Looking down the list, there aren't a great number of sprinters. You mentioned Ethan Hayter, who could be a very exciting card potentially. Do Ineos Grenadiers want to try and attempt what Jumbo did at the Tour de France? But the points classification, who do you see kind of as the key? We've got no big rider from Quickstep in terms of this, unless Julien Philippe tries to go for it. Ackermann, Merlier, where do you kind of see this jersey going?
I see it going to Tim Merlier easily. He's a top-level sprinter who doesn't quite get the credit he deserves. He's got a strong team around him, but also quite an interesting team in terms of the climbers that they're bringing as well. I know this is a side note, but we have Rob Stannard, Jay Vines, Andrew Merderser, who are all strong climbers who can also help out in the sprint train. But I just see Merlier, who's got that kick that I don't think Ackermann quite has. Yes, Merlier is moving teams at the end of the year, but I'm sure he's going to be as motivated as possible in that Belgian champions jersey to win stages and to win that green jersey.
Yeah, well, Fabio Jakobsen managed to win it for the first time for Quickstep last year, which was a weird stat. But Ewan, he was also the first pure sprinter, you would say, since Degenkolb in 2014. And then there was another weight 2010 with Mark Cavendish. So is it going to a sprinter? That's the other question.
I think it could go to a sprinter. It really does depend on how many breakaways go up the road, if the points and stages get swept up by them, whether we have a very emphatic GC rider who scoops up stages left, right, and center. But I'm quite convinced the sprinter will get it, especially since there's not much competition. If Merlier wins 4 stages in the sprints, given that the points and sprints are weighted more heavily than mountain stages, I think Tim's got a good shout.
So anyways, with that, we now come to our favorite part of the show, the predictions round. And of course, make sure to comment down below to get involved as well. And then we'll all laugh at each other later for the reaction of the Vuelta España predictions. But Ewan, we're not going to start with the podium because we'll save that to the end. Who do you think is going to be winning the Mountains jersey this year at La Vuelta España?
I think that the Mountains jersey of the Vuelta España will be going to Juan Pel Lopez of Trek Segafredo of Spain.
That was actually a good shout. I am going to go for Simon Yates. So now for the points classification.
I'm gonna have to go for my boy Tim Merlier.
Right, okay, I'll be a bit more rogue. Well, not that rogue. Ethan Hayter. And now we'll come to the podium. Ewan, what is your top 3 starting from 3rd place, please?
Okay, this one is very, very difficult. It's an open Vuelta. We have question marks over Roglic, but in my head, this will be as if Roglic is completely healed. He's had his palm read. He's good. He's 100%, and he's ready to fight for the victory. So in that case, 3rd place goes to Richard Carapaz of Ecuador. 2nd place goes to Jai Hindley, and the winner will be Primož Roglic. I feel so bad for Joao and Remco for saying that, but they can fight it out for the white jersey between them.
Don't be too disappointed with them because they do feature in my top 3. I'm going to put Jai Hindley, the Giro d'Italia champion, in 3rd, Almeida in 2nd, and Remco Evenepoel as our first Belgian winner since Freddie Martins. Yeah, we'll see if that happens. But yeah, moving on. Our final round is the bonus round, and no surprise that this year's Vuelta a España preview show. Bonus round is going to be, where will Alejandro Valverde finish?
I think he is safe for a top 10. I reckon he finishes in 6th place.
Okay, I'm going to say 16. Anyways, that's it for our La Vuelta a España 2022 preview show. Make sure to check out our daily coverages and our videos coming out before the race starts. And of course, we'll have commentary live streams as well. So we will see you around.
I'll basically be cycling the other way, and the winner is the first person to take a selfie with Big Ben. So without further ado, 3, 2, 1.